So, good evening, everybody. We're delighted that you could come along to the second of our cybersecurity sessions. We're delighted to have John with us today. For those of you who don't know John, he's been around Galway a long time if you've been listening. And he would have started his career in digital, and then he set up his own company, Netfort, back in 2003. So he was with that company until he sold it to Rapid7 in 2017. So now he's working with Rapid7 as their senior director of products. So he's a native of Kerry. He hasn't lost the accent. And I see he's a banner up the back there. So he's well used to winning Sam. So without further ado, I'll hand over to John and he'll talk to you about his story with Netfort.
Thanks very much. So I suppose, if everybody could mute themselves except for maybe Morgan, if that would be okay, Morgan Doyle. So as I'm also joined by Morgan Doyle, so Morgan and I work together in digital, and we're the founders of Netfort. We now work for Rapid7 in Galway since the acquisition. So, it was way back in 2002, and we just do a play here that we set up Netfort, Morgan and I, techies. Morgan and I worked in digital and networking and security space. So we looked at our options, and we had left digital actually for a few years, and we'd worked in other startups as well, VC funded startups. And we decided to start up our own company. And one of the options, there's lots of options to set up your own company. You could start looking for VC funding straight away. And how do you fund it? So one of the options we looked at and we came across is bootstrapping. And so what I'm going to try and cover today, what Morgan and I are going to try and cover today is let's talk about bootstrapping, what it is, why we did it, and how we did it in security space, around funding and sales and so on. And if we were doing it again, which is another big question, what would we do differently? And so, if that's okay, can everybody hear me okay? Morgan, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, you're fine, you're clear, yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So there's a book, it's this book, it's on the screen there, called Bootstrapping Your Business by Greg Gianforte. It's a good book. I would recommend it for anybody to read, even if they want considering bootstrapping your business. And the definition is start a business and build it up with minimum outside investment, funding in the state through personal finance, state support, and sales. And it's about reading if I decide to bootstrap or not. And there are some great, quotes there like, make sales job number one. And of course, because, some of the funding of the company is through sales, and sales is hard, it does make it a bit more stressful. But sales and getting sales as quickly as possible is one of the key aspects to bootstrapping. So, and I guess myself and Morgan talked for a few minutes about our backgrounds. We were engineers, touch engineers, worked in digital together. Multinationals is a great place to work. We met a lot of people, got great experience. Like companies like digital invested so much in their staff. And I suppose one of the things I want to be careful in multinationals sometimes, I think, is that you get very comfortable, and maybe to get out of your comfort zone, it can be hard. So after nearly 10 years, I left, and Morgan left around the same time. We joined two different VC-based startups, and that was an interesting experience. Working for a startup, a smaller company, exposes you to a lot more functions than a multinational, because you're involved in sales, you're nearly involved in everything. So that was very good experience for both of us, where we met a lot more people, and we learned a lot about working with VCs and so on. So the company I work for was the CETA. Morgan, do you want to give a quick intro there about your...
Yeah, so I joined Digital HP in '94, as I suppose a junior software engineer, and I worked there in a group, the High Performance Computer Group. So it was a well-funded group that was making supercomputers. They were selling to large organizations with big budgets and deep pockets. And I was, I worked there for 8-9 years before I ever really talked to a customer. I was many layers back from the customer engagement. We were just, running whatever projects we were running. So it was a very kind of insulated environment. We're working a very kind of high-tech stuff, but we never really understood customer needs. We didn't have to deal with sales, product management, we just got a list of tasks to do and executed them, and maybe did more architecture and engineering as we went along. But as John said, those functions of defining the product you have and what you want to sell and how it's going to answer a need, and fundamentally who's going to pay for it, we're miles away from what we were doing. I joined a startup then around 2000. It was a busy year. Moved house, got married, started a new job, and that was a VC-backed startup here in Galway. And it was, an excellent technical product that I was with the company for about 3 years. There were various people involved, and it was well architected, well put together, it was good security, it answered a need we felt that's still there. But the sales strategy was taken was that, it should be sold at a C level. So we'd only talk to CEOs of big companies and see could we sell it in there. And, that was a fundamental flaw, because we were a tiny company in Galway. The product we were making would be heavily embedded in the business process. So no big company was going to take a chance in a small company in Galway. So, the kind of product marketing was all wrong. And in that company, I didn't get to talk to many customers either, because, at the end of the day, there were none. It was well funded by VC, ran for a few years. When the VC money ran out and there was no sales, there were no other options. So the company shrank very rapidly to a small number of people, and I left, moved on, did a bit of contracting, and then moved into Netfort. Okay, so depending on where you are and how many customers you have, you have high touch or low touch with customers ultimately who are going to have to, create a PO to buy your product, and that's how bootstrapping really focuses your mind, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, so like the startup I was with a CTO based in Irvine in California, who were doing a high-speed firewall VPN. And I remember, like, I was at some customer meetings and selling to C-level too. And I was at one in the Twin Towers, actually, years and years ago, obviously. And we went in and saw a firewall by its nature is inline on a network. If a firewall is down, the network is down, you're in trouble. And we were saying to a guy in a big finance company, he said, okay. And obviously the sales guy who brought us in had a contact there. And he said, oh, who are you guys again? And we said, we're a CISA, after giving him some intro. He said, so you guys expect me to take this device, this appliance, and put it inline in my network. And if this device goes down, my network is down. And we said, is that true? He said, it is true. And he said, we don't buy devices like this from startups. We buy from Cisco, or we buy from Checkpoint. And the meeting was over. So, and that company ended up with practically no customers as well before it folded. And the whole strategy of saying the C-level in a very competitive market, that's the management of the company. There's lots of issues. There was lots of issues. We learned a lot. So we, as Morgan said, it was really interesting experience. And it kind of turned us towards, say, like, we knew we could write software. And as my mom said, when I said I was leaving to set up her own company, she said, does that mean you're going to be on the road selling? And she said, oh my God. So we didn't know we could sell. So we wanted to prove ourselves that we could sell something. In terms of whatever about getting a valuation or getting investment, we wanted to prove it to ourselves that we could develop something and sell it. So that's one of the reasons we went down the road. And then there was a program which I talk about a bit more, sponsored by the University in the Brosnan, which helped out a lot. In the Brosnan has been a great help along the way. We raised some seed capital, we invested ourselves, I suppose, and you need to have some money yourselves, and it's a very efficient way because of tax-wise of putting money in as well. And we got some money from BES. But for us, it was about, we wanted more control at the start, definitely. And, it was the way we want. So it's all about how you want to do it. There is also the option of taking that money up front and doing it that way. So when we set it up, all the engineers that we asked to join, we had worked with before. So you're doing a startup. You don't really want to do it with people that you see all the time in companies and startups, even in the US. The core team, they move around a lot. They all know each other. They all worked in previous companies. And that's what you want. You want people that you worked with before, because that's how you get to know them, that you trust, that are smart, that care about what they do. So, we invested hugely in our technology and the engineers. We kept that going all along. Of course, you also need to know the basics, get the basics right. You need to execute. You need to make sure everybody deals with customers appropriately and look and train people, take each other on, don't be afraid to question why we're doing something, look after each other. You know, it's all about, we were 17 years at this. It was, as Morgan said, it was a very long time. And, you know, but it went so quick looking back on it. And, there was good times and bad times. It can be very stressful. I suppose the other thing about doing a startup, any startup, obviously, is that, in this country, and a lot of people here probably on the call, and we work for multinationals, so we look after people very well. But, due to the tax scheme and different, we all know how much tax we pay in this company. To make serious F-off money in this country, one of the options to do it is to have either do your own startup or join the startup at a very early stage and get shares or options. It is, then you always know what's going on. You have more control. It's definitely one of the great options to make some serious money in this country.
Yeah, but it's more than that. When I was at that VC company, or when I was with HP, there was always, since I joined Hewlett Packard and Galway, there was every now and again a recurring rumor the place was going to close and the plant was going to close. And again, you're so many levels away from those decisions, you just can't see very far down the road. Where when you're with the small company and you're part of the startup, you're in control. Okay, so it's kind of frightening because you're going to live and die by what you do yourselves, but at least you're in control, and you don't feel that you're on the receiving end of decisions all the time. You're making those decisions. So if you think the company is going in the wrong direction, well then, change the direction the company is going in, and it gives you that kind of control. And that's it's very kind of liberating. It's actually quite enjoyable, if you like doing that. The flip side of it is you're not in a well-funded multinational company, and while John says you might make money at the end of it, at the start of it you certainly don't. Salaries are not what they are. You don't have the pension, you don't have all those things that go with it. So you're taking a risk. You're absolutely taking a risk here. And while you're in control, if you're doing the bootstrap method, it's a very frugal kind of existence for a while, or was for us anyway. So that's the other thing to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely true. And that book, that book there, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, is a really good book about execution and rhythm of meetings and stuff to read as well. It's an easy read. It's well worth a look. So just, I suppose, way back in May 2002, Enterprise Ireland and NUIG came up with this idea of a technology enterprise program. It was basically, they were looking for, I think it was 8 people who were interested in doing a startup. So they did some interviewing. I saw the ad, I think I saw it in the advertiser, and I applied, I got interviewed. We discussed it. So basically the idea was that if you were successful, you got through it, it was like a mini MBA for startups. They gave you some grants, I think it was 30 or 40K at the time, and office space and mentoring. And this all happened in NUIG. So there was, NUIG were involved, Enterprise Ireland involved, and Mary Ryan and West People was on. It was a pretty intensive 1 year. So every day you had to be in the college, every Thursday, for a full day. And you got mentoring from different people, like, how to do business plans and sales and stuff. And you got an office space, and you got all the stuff around that, a lot of stuff that you didn't have to worry about. It was a push, that would get you going, to get you out of. So I was working in the startup after, and I could see the writing in the wall. Things weren't going so good, and I decided, let's give this a shot. We were always just interested in doing our own, and this was the push that we needed. And the idea was that after a year, if you show some progress, Enterprise Ireland would back you. They would give you, some help. So we invested ourselves. I think maybe we invested 140K, and there was under seed capital scheme, I think EI invested maybe 180. So that was over 300K, and that was, 2 years of road with just ourselves and Enterprise Ireland backing us. And along the way then towards the end, we were getting sales. We'll talk about how we did that very quickly as well. And we looked at some VCs, we looked at the angel investors towards after a year or two, and they offered us money. And it was really tempting to take the money and have this big few 100K in the bank. And we signed up to take one, and we pulled out of it eventually, but we got some advice. And it's really important, like, because we were techies looking back on it. And I got some advice from guys I trusted, I played football and rugby with in the financial area, and said, you really need to take this money now. Be careful what you sign. This money doesn't come for nothing, for free. You're going to be dealing with these people for the lifetime of the company. And we didn't take the money. And we kept going for a while. Eventually we did some BS with family and friends. And that was interesting. We had ended up with over 30 small shareholders, which was too many. So we learned a lot about that too. But they offered in small amounts of money, the people, and they trusted us with money, but they also expected a return as well, because they went through some tough times. And then we got sales, and that cash and gave us options. So building up sales, having recurring revenue, and keeping it going is critical to this, and gave us options going forward. Anything else you want to say on that, Mark?
Yeah, it's the VC versus bootstrap is all about control. If you go the VC route, you can get a ball of money, and you're comfortable. You can keep the wolf from the door because you get the salary and all that, and you can make plans. You can make plans to invest in technology or sales marketing. But my understanding is that the VCs will look at a company and they'll have a fairly short time they want to turn it around in, and they will make decisions around how money is spent that you sometimes can't contest, even if it's not what you want to do. So vast amounts of money can be spent in sales and marketing programs before you have the proper technology fit to back it up. And certainly that's what I've seen before. And after a while then, if the money runs out, the VC say, right, we reinvest, we just need to change the cap table, and people start to get diluted then very quickly, and you don't end up owning the company at all. That's the downside of a VC as far as I see it.
Yeah, and there's timing. It's a question of timing as well, as you said. Like that when you've proved it yourself, and you see that you're doing traction in the market, and you have to make sales, and say, well, we've sold in the US and we can sell more if we got more marketing. At least there's some validation going on.
Yes.
It's really it can be a question of timing. So before you get along, before you do that, because people put down predictions and based on what. So it's before you can do it yourself. And by the time we took some serious money from BS, and that was after a few years, and we gone through, as Morgan said, we were very tight. Until when we got that money, we knew how to spend it. We were very careful. It wasn't just a whole pile of money that we were doing this and that with. We're always very careful with it. So we always invested in our technology and our people. We knew that was core to going forward. Just on the appliance and the product. So Morgan can chip in here too in a sec. We, initially we decided one way to do a bootstrap is that, there's a lot of open source out there. It was kind of rough, the open source. There was an open source system called Snort. It was an intrusion detection system. And we developed a GUI around it. It basically tried to find bad things on the network by sniffing traffic. And so we was to put it on a network and at that time, we're talking over 10 years ago here, a lot of networks were very open. There was a lot of security issues. We found something bad, and it was an appliance we plug in. That got us in the door. We find something bad. We try to sell to them. We got some recurring revenue because of that. Mark, do you want to say anything about that? Anything about the product?
It was an excellent product, John. Really well engineered. Yeah, I mean, the product evolves every time you meet a customer and talk to them, and some customers will influence you more than others. You've got to make sure you're listening to the right customers. That as you make changes to your product, that it's in line with your strategy, because one potential deal can make you change direction too much, and you may not even land that deal, and you can go the wrong way. So you have to work with customers, listen to them, but listen to them carefully, and make sure you listen to the right customers, I think.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true, because one of the things about Bootstrap is sales is so important to keep the company going. And I was doing a lot of the sales initially, all the time, really, even at the end when we had salespeople. And let's go back to Morgan. I said, if you add this feature, we get the sale. And our core at the time, and it isn't still, and always we stuck with it, was traffic analysis, an engine we developed our own engine for analyzing network traffic. And Morgan would say to me, that's not, logs aren't part of that, or agents aren't part of that. We're not doing it. It's not in our space. It's not our niche. And he would push back hard, and he was right. I was the guy trying to do anything to get a sale and be a jack of all trades, and Mark would say, stay with it, stay with the niche, stay focused. And that ultimately, we paid off in the end for sure. So that was tough though. That was tough. It was really hard because of the pressure of getting sales. Like sales is tough. Like initially, I used to go around to universities in the US or the UK, and then Ireland first. So we sold in our own back door first. We sold to universities in Ireland. If we weren't going to sell in Ireland, what was the point of going to the UK? It was the cheapest place to sell. So we sold to local universities and local government. And I used to go around with a little box, a little PC in a cardboard box and my laptop, and plug it in with a crossover cable and give a demo. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, The Pursuit of Happiness. That was me going around with the box with the PC in it and into people and trying to give a demo. I still get very emotional actually when I look at this movie. But it could have been, I should have been in that movie maybe. I was living the dream. But that was tough work. And what we did after a while when we worked with some partners is that we saw that, if I go back here one, we recognized that it wasn't scalable. Shipping boxes around the place, trying to get them back if we can sell them, going on site. So we developed a software download by looking at a partner, SolarWinds, we were doing some work with. We were complementary to them. So they had a low-touch software download, lots of videos. You could download the software, try for 30 days, follow up with a call, and sell. So we invested hugely in that. And that was a major milestone in the company. And we it meant that we sold like in Australia and US and the UK, even though we still went on site of it for the larger ones. People were able to try the system very, very easily. Is that okay, Mark? Anything on that?
Yeah, it's kind of reducing the cost of sale and trying to extend your reach, into markets that you don't have a presence. And the further you go away, the more expensive your sale process becomes.
Yeah. So that was our strategy. Proved ourselves we could sell locally with our own context. As Morgan said to me, we were talking about this presentation, he said, we were lucky in that because of digital and our networks ourselves, I suppose, when we were bootstrapping, we had a lot of contacts. We had a lot of people who helped us. The digital network was fantastic. Enterprise Ireland were very helpful. And once you get into like a niche, like we sold to county councils, most of the councils in Ireland and a lot of universities, and they have networking events, like, they had a university network conference. You go to that conference, you sit down and have coffee with the guys, and suddenly you're sent to UCD if you've excelled because you met the guy at the conference. So that niche, we stuck with it. And it was also a very interesting learning ground because, one of our first deployments was in a council, a fairly big council. So we sit on the network, we look at traffic, and I went down, I put the system in myself, and nothing was showing up. And I was ringing the guys in the office and said, you're doing it wrong. So I spent 3 days in that council having coffee with the guys, while the guys back in base in Galway were troubleshooting it remotely, trying to get it to work. Because we had never deployed in a big network, we couldn't simulate it. And we eventually got it working, and we got the sale actually. But if we had tried that in a multinational, which we sold to after a few years, we would have been out the door pretty quick, and we would never got back in again. So it's kind of interesting when you try stuff out, try it with friendly people, or people, will not be too strict. Like, the councils were, the guys we dealt with were very easygoing, and I had some context there. It was really important. It was just by accident, really. We were trying to sell to anybody at the time. Enterprise Ireland were a great support all along the whole process with their trade missions and so on. I guess, but the biggest, one of the biggest milestones as well. So as Morgan would say, we didn't have huge pots of money to invest in sales or marketing or campaigns. And I had worked with a guy in US, Dudley, and UK, Dudley, who was a complementary partner, and I asked him to join us after doing some deals with him, and he joined us. And Dudley came on board with a Rolodex of contacts in the UK, people who trusted him, and like people in the Football Association, people in the ANZ Bank, people in UCL, LSE, all different types of companies. And over 2 years, Dudley worked that Rolodex with us, and we sold to those guys, and we sold a lot. Like, it was in the millions. And we kept those customers, and we got their recurring revenue. And then after 2 years, because we didn't have a sales and marketing machine working, we had no leads to give Dudley, he left. but we had the customers and they stayed and they kept paying their recurring revenue. So we would sell maybe a deal for 40,000 UK, and part of the deal was they paid support and maintenance. If they liked the product, they paid, I think it was around 20% say every year. And we had, 93% retention. And those customers paying the support and maintenance kept the company going because we looked after them and we had them. And we built up cash as a result. So that's how we got our bit of scale with the Rolodex, and we got some promoters. Besides that, and we tried a few times to get a bit more sales spikes. We didn't do it. We didn't have a whole type of money to play with. Maybe that's a downfall of a bootstrapping. But we kept developing the technology. Anything on that, Mark?
Yeah, I suppose when you talk about when you're working a niche, so we spent a lot of time working in universities that were a good fit for us, and the universities used to organize kind of network shop and various conferences like that. If we could get a speaking slot at one of those where we could be seen as a thought leader in what we were doing, and you can give a presentation. It can't be a sales pitch. It has to be kind of a technology review or something, but subtly you're promoting what you're doing. That had great resonance and gave you some sort of authority to talk about stuff, and leads would fall out of that. That's great where you got kind of a captive audience and they're all interested. To try and build out a big outbound marketing machine from that is not straightforward, and we never really succeeded at that. It's hard to find experts in that area. There's no formula for doing it as far as we could see, and we tried various ways of doing it. Lots of blog content, lots of promotions, partnering with other websites and products and stuff like that, but we never really got that kind of scale, that marketing machine where you get a load of inbound leads and then just sell straight out to them. Never really worked for us. Yeah.
No, that's fair.
Find your audience and talk to it in other ways, I think is the thing.
Yeah. I mean, like there's a line there, look after your promoters. So we had customers like in the US, like Tyco or McGraw-Hill. And so the guy in Tyco was, we dealt with initially, and that lead actually came from a guy in the college I met looking for a coffee. I met him in Friar's coffee shop, and he was working as a consultant in Tyco, and he had me on the phone that night to the CTO of Tyco, the CISO, and eventually we got I'd say it was a $500,000 deal out of Tyco over a period of a few years. But the security guy we were dealing with there left, Dave. And when I was flying to Newark from Shannon, I would get the train to Princeton Junction is about an hour, and I'd meet Dave, go for lunch over 3 or 4 years, and got to know him very well. And he was a good guy, very sharp guy, and very friendly guy as well. He just liked us. And then he moved to McGraw-Hill, and he rang me after a week, said, John, I've moved, and I want to install the system here. And we got another, $500,000 or something off McGraw-Hill. And we had about 3 or 4 guys like that moved around that gave us huge deals. And you don't need that many of them, but you do need to look after them. You need to, and God, I don't, even with the changes now, it was like, I met all these people face to face a lot. We did. I spent over the last few years, especially a lot of time in the States. And it definitely was worth it. Now I don't know how I would do it, but at that time it was worth it. Okay. So these are some of the names we got, and some of them downloaded. We got the US Navy had downloaded our software, and then we started calling them and meeting them, and the Department of Treasury, and this all because of the software download and scale and our niche, what we were doing. So it was great to have those logos. As Morgan said, it was hard work, but it was very, very satisfying, and it was all about the right time as well. And we were talking to potential acquisitions. These stood to us. Okay, so the home stretch, we'll get to the fun part. Last 2 or 3 slides, guys, you'd be glad to know. So we had built up a pot of cash. It was about we were over €1 million in cash in the bank over the last few years because of the recurring revenue, and that gave us options. We didn't have to do anything, but the company was 17 years old, and there were shareholders and there was staff, and everybody was saying, well, how are we going to get some money back out of this, if ever, because we've been working hard. So we looked at the different options. After 10 years, we engaged with a Irish broker to try and help us sell the company. Well, see if there was any interest. So we did up slides in a teaser document, sent it around to some people, and I guess some interest, but basically nothing, nothing definite. So then a US VC came on board and came to us and said, we'll take it to the US and we'll take over the company and run it there. And myself and Morgan were discussing it. And one of the aspects of the deal was that the current shareholders, they were trying to get the current shareholders out basically as cheaply as possible and have the money for scaling in the US. So these people, who our family and friends, were involved and stuck with us from the start. And they had gone through some tough times with the recession and everything. So we said no. So that deal stopped. And that was an interesting experience, that thing, with dealing with them on that. Then we were working with a partner, and we could see that was a good integration. It was getting some traction with customers in the States. You were a US multinational. I was over in the States, and they invited me into their management team to give a presentation. We had done an integration ourselves with their product with no help from them, and they were amazed. Brought me in, and maybe September, October last year, brought us in. We gave a presentation to their management team. They said, looks good, thanks very much. We knew they were in acquisition mode. Nothing until January. We came back after Christmas. No interest from anybody. This is 7 years ago. And looking forward to a tough year again. And there was some interesting strategy and board meetings. And in January, they came back to us and said, we want to move forward and buy the company. So we did some negotiations, signed an LOI, and started due diligence. Got engaged with some legal people, got a lot of advice. We were all very, very excited because it was a good deal. And in May of that year, 2 weeks before the close, they stopped the deal. And basically, eventually, they tried to do a version of how we did themselves, but failed. At that stage, all the employees knew, all the shareholders knew. We could go back to all of them and say, sorry, this is not happening. And that was some tough conversations. So we learned a lot. It was extremely painful. I mean, it took us a long time to recover. I don't know, Morgan, anything to say about that?
That was very deflating because, in a way, we kind of targeted them. We knew they were missing, they had a gap in their portfolio. We could fill it perfectly. We did an integration. Everybody saw it, agreed it worked well. And, we were on the acquisition trail and it all seemed to be going okay. The due diligence took a huge amount of time. Amount of headspace that we had to put into it. That other things kind of went by the by. And ultimately, I think, it probably didn't happen because of some sort of internal politics. Somebody else in the company wanted to go build their own. And there was a discussion within that company, we think, would the buyer build it? And I think ultimately the decision was that we're going to build it. And so you can do everything right and it might still not work, was the lesson we took from that too. You're not in control of this process. There's a certain amount you can do to influence it, but you can't control it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting though. We learned a lot, and it was I guess a long recover. So then over the last few years, we started getting emails like this inbound from Ernst & Young. And we had a number of these directly from other companies that we had done some work with. And we had it wasn't just one or two, we'd say 4 or 5 sniffing around us. And this time we said, okay, let's get some US-based help. And we engaged with a US broker, a banker in Sand Hill to help us. These are very interesting, it can be very exciting. Did you see this, Morgan? I would say to him the following day. And every we get kind of excited, there'll be a number of calls. And a lot of time, this one, for example, went nowhere. There was no offer, no nothing. And just want to be very careful about these type of emails when, it's very distracting as well. And you have to look after the core business. So the broker made some approaches. These came, and again, it was mild. Like we had nothing firm. We had few people came. They said we would get offers. It was dragging out. It didn't happen. So we were like, we were thinking, is this ever going to happen? To be honest, a lot of the time. But I always, thanks to Morgan and all the team, we stuck with the niche. We had the core people from the start. They stayed with us, and we had our niche, and we stepped within that. So I knew that if we stuck with that, if we stuck with our niche and kept on to our core people, that we always had a shot, and we had the cash in the bank as well. So out of the blue, then on Wednesday, as you can see, the 5th of December, so we had some systems set up. If somebody downloaded our software, we got an email like this. If somebody wanted to become a partner, we got an email like this to a group of people. And I got this email on Wednesday. And when I saw it straight away, I knew of the company Rapid7, and they had bought an Irish company before, and I knew they had a gap. They didn't have traffic. And so I rang Sam, who's the VP, one of the VPs there, and myself and Morgan and I did a call with him the following week. And it was probably one of the best calls. Morgan did a great job. He went through all our technology with him. It was all our own technology. It was supposed to be an hour of a Zoom, and it was an hour and a half. He said, this is too important, let's keep going. He was the only guy in the call, Sam was. And he said things like, we've been looking in this space for a few years, and you know something, there's not much out there. And that was our niche again, that we had stuck with it. And call ended. He said, we're busy, it's in the quarter, in the year, we'll get back to you guys in January. He said, fine, great. This is, at the time, it was a partnership. They wanted to integrate with our product and resell it. On the following Monday, he pinged me, he said, John, our plans have changed, can we talk tomorrow? And on that day, we spoke to him again, and then M&A, Conan came on the call, who was your M&A guy. And he was going through different things and talking about the structure of the company and this. And he said, after about 10 minutes, he said, John, would you be interested in acquisition rather than a partnership? And we paused and we said, yes, but only if it was based on our technology and our people. Our revenue numbers weren't high enough, they're around just under 2. And our valuation would have been bad as a result. And he said, absolutely, this is a tech and team acquisition. And they came to Dublin in the first week of January. They, from day one, they were great to deal with. They were very honest. They came to Dublin, they got a bus down to Galway the following day to come to the office to see it, and went back, and we closed the deal. This is the email Morgan and I got on the, on the last call on April the 1st actually. And it was, I know Morgan would say about the whole process. Morgan, what do you want to say about, what do you think the whole thing was?
Well, they were a good fit for us, so it was relatively straightforward. They're a good company, and they're probably a better fit than anybody we met before. But the M&A guy was interesting because that was a reach out to us, and talking to Conan, he was saying he gets 6 or 7 inbound requests a day from companies trying to sell themselves to Rapid7, and other companies he's worked for in an M&A capacity. And he said most of them go straight in the bin, So trying to put yourself up there and sell yourself to these companies doesn't really work. You have to advertise yourself and look for kind of an inbound. I think let's say you don't have a whole lot of control over this process. You can influence it, but ringing up these guys, say, do you want to buy me? Isn't really going to work. I think someone described it. It's hard to sell a company. It's much easier to be bought. Is that the way you'd phrase it, John?
Yeah, absolutely, Morgan. I mean, that's a very good point. And we found that as well with the brokers we dealt with, who's sending out our, the teasers to all the companies. We were asking them were they interested. And it's quite, obviously, I think it's a question of timing. We had spoke to Rapid7 a few years before that, just in general, not just on the partnership, and there was no interest really, well, mild. And then obviously over a period of time, they were getting customer requests for this. And, so when we asked them how they heard about us, which is very interesting as well, how they found out about Netfort, because we were practically unknown in the States. You know, we hadn't the presence there. We had some good customers, but we didn't have, you know, a name, and we were small. So we had signed up with Forrester, the analyst firm, to help us get known and get sales in the States. And, you know, Forrester and Gartner are in the same, you know, the same areas. So I used to go to San Francisco a lot, and I spent a lot of time in the States at the end, the last 4 or 5 years. I used to meet the Forrester guy, a guy called Joseph, and he liked us. He liked what we did. We'd go for a beer, we'd have coffee. I kept in touch with him. And Rapid7 were also a customer of Forrester. And Sam said to, a few months before they approached us, or a month before, said to Joseph during an event he was at, you know, we're looking at companies in the traffic analysis space. We're finding it hard to find somebody suitable. Do you know of anybody? And he was this is down in San Diego, I think he said. They said, yeah, talk to John Brosnan in Galway. And that's how they found us. So, you know, that's an interesting lesson. You know, spending time with these guys, getting them to like you, even though, and you know, we didn't get, to be honest, any sales that we know of, product sales from Forrester. We got the biggest sale ever from them, really, you know. So looking back on the money we spent on them, which is about 40K a year or something, it was definitely worth it. So, you know, this is the last slide, guys, and sorry for going on so long, but you know, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. You know, there was, from day one, this time, we learned a lot from the previous approaches and deals as well. And one of the things that Rapid7 wanted, they wanted an org chart of all our people, because the people were so important. And we did this org charts, and we were worried that we had people in the Ukraine, in Seoul, in Bucharest, and in Galway, very dispersed. So, but we put it up and we were honest with them, and they discussed it with us. Said, well, how come these people are all over the place? And they said, well, they worked in Galway, they moved back. And eventually they said, you know, we have the same. This is not a problem. So from day one, we were honest with them and they were honest with us. And even though we were tempted to, you know, to do different things, but, you know, you can't roll back. You know, especially in deals like this, be totally honest from day one and go with your gut. If the guys seem sound and you meet them, which is obviously interesting now, and we met them a lot. They came to Galway, they spent time with us, all of them, the management team. And
yeah, sorry, on that thing, you know, we had engaged a broker because, you know, we wanted to do this, and the broker was helping us position ourselves to maximize our chances. And, you know, we'd spent a lot of time talking to the broker about how we present our slide deck and how we present our technology. And there was a constant, I wouldn't say battle is the right word, but the broker kept trying to over-egg and over-describe what we had done. You know, machine learning was all the rage at the time, and the broker was very keen for us to imply or say that we did machine learning and we were in the machine learning space and we could do all this automated detections. And we were saying, you know, we don't do that. You know, this is not what we do. This is not our core technology. We do something else. Our data can be used by machine learning and it's an add-on, but that's not our core business. And that's just an example, but there are other things. And if we'd gone out with a deck like that and presented it to people, then you get your initial interest and then you do the due diligence, you're going to be exposed, right? So we went out and we were very clear about what we were doing because we were confident that it was worthwhile and there was value in the technology. So you have to be honest. You can't, you know, some people will want you to over describe what you have, and it's a very, I always thought it was a very dangerous place to be. When you walk into any meeting, you have to be confident that what you're talking about is actually true, because then you can deliver it and you won't be undermined or exposed. So certainly, you know, brokers and people like that will try and, because they think they're picking up the valuation by doing this, but they can actually, you know, trip you up if you're not careful.
Yeah, definitely. And like, you know, they're also, of course, like these brokers, I mean, these guys cost a lot of money. Like there's an upfront fee. It's like you're talking 50 or 60K or something initially, you know, and then they're on a very high commission based on the sale price. And they can, you know, you know, if there's a sale, which they're obviously taking a gamble on, you know, they can come up with some serious money. In my experience, and as you know, I would say from the minute we signed, like we did some work at Rapid7, we presented our own slide decks that Margaret and I were comfortable with. They came back and forth a bit. We did a negotiation with them ourselves regarding the price, because you know, we had a valuation that we had based on previous approaches and based on what we've seen in the market. And people thought that we were mad. You know, like if you look at valuations in companies in Ireland, there'll be what's your revenue, what's your sales, and like yeah, small sales. But I knew that we had a niche. I knew that we had good technology. I knew that the companies in our space had investment of 20, 30 million. So those, you know, these were all factors. And I was confident in that. We were confident. So when I was doing the negotiation, we were doing it with the guy on the phone. He could, you know, he felt that. But from the minute we signed the LOI and the deal, and it took 4 months to do diligence, the brokers were a fantastic help, because you can get very excited, and you know, the advice to keep you calm and all the way they look at everything. Like there's a line there about the contracts. It was the back. So, you know, if we're here, is that, you know, if we're doing it from again next time, from the start, our IP, our software, the copyrights, our contracts with employees, all those have our contracts with partners and distributors, so that when you are being acquired, you can say, I can walk away and cease the contract. There's clauses in there around that. Like you already have to get signatures of all your shareholders, and we had over 30 signatures to get, and you can't force somebody to sign. So the less signatures you have to get, the less, you know, the less stressful and hard it is. So all these things about you know, getting good legal advice from the start and paying for it, because you know, sometimes you think this will never happen, but the chance, like if you keep going and allow you keep going and you work your niche, you'll always have a shot. And when it does happen, you know, you don't want something like this to trip you up. You anything to say on that, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. From day one, you got to set out your stall as if you expect you're going to sell this, and things that you can ignore on a day-to-day basis, like the who owns the intellectual property, what are all the contracts like. It's very easy to ignore that stuff when you're just trying to get sales, but the pigeons come home to roost very quickly. So, you know, someone said to us, you know, pay for the best legal advice you can afford at the time, get it all set up at the start, and then just follow that template as you go along, and it'll reduce an awful lot of headaches at the end if it comes to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's definitely worth it. It's worth it. I mean, the legal advice especially, and it can be expensive, but before you sign anything, getting somebody to say, you know, any agreement you make, writing it down, and getting and have multiple copies, all that stuff, you know, eating that frog, that messy stuff. Like hiring is a comment there about, like we, as Morgan said, we spent a lot of time different hiring and sales and marketing in the UK and bit in US, and it was very tough. We spent or wasted a lot of money. It's always outside our comfort zone. We didn't crack it for sure. The successful guy Dudley, we already knew him as well. I would, like a guy would say to me at one stage, and we did it once, my friend is interested in a job, he's a great guy. And, you know, we hired him, we hired her. And, you know, unless you work with somebody, you don't know if they're a great guy, they're very good. So even if they're a friend of somebody, just be careful. And when somebody leaves, and doing it in a clean way, because, you know, when we were doing an M&A process, they wanted to see the contracts of all people who have worked in the company and why they left. So you've got to make sure that everything is done right all the time. The analyst thing was valuation with Forrester got us to lead. We should have taken more pictures along the way, is something I regret now. You know, it was a long time and it's only a small thing. You know, overall, like even in like it was well worth it, guys. You know, the satisfaction you get from doing something in a startup. And I know today in these unprecedented times, it's tough. And I know how lucky we were regarding time. I know how hard it is. I've been sitting out there listening to people like me talk for 17 years. And I say, well, who's that guy think he is? F off, you know, this is tough. But, you know, there are major opportunities out there. And being your own boss, working with your own friends, being in control, knowing exactly what's going on. It's definitely, I would highly recommend it. It's definitely worth it. I know, Mark, you probably won't.
I'd echo all that. Yeah, it's there's no certainties in it, but it's definitely worthwhile. Yeah. Okay.
Hey guys, Jesus, sorry for going on so long. Not too bad though. If anybody has anything else left to cover quickly, let me know. I want to talk. I can talk to us anytime as well.
Oh, guys, you just need to write a book. That's some story. Maybe you've started already. I suppose one thing that struck me while you were talking in the early days, whenever you were setting up, so your investors were your family and friends, does that put more pressure on you?
Well, speaking for me, yeah, I would. Well, it's a good question. It's like they never put pressure on us, even though like there was a recession and all this in between, and very rarely somebody was one or two people that come back to you and say like, how do we get our money back, or how can we sell our shares? And there was some stuff like that, but it's a fair point. It's a good question. It's a good question. So then, like you would say, if you took money from a VC and personally you don't know them at all, is that less stressful? Because it's not family and friends. And you're there going down to Kerry and meeting a lot of my brothers and brother-in-laws, my father-in-law, and that's all those people, and they, even when the deal fell through, they were saying it will happen. So, it doesn't. The people that, your nice family and friends, it doesn't, They don't work. What do you think?
Well, certainly there was a VC who wanted to burn the current shareholders at one stage, and that deal was rejected, probably because they were family and friends. If there were a bunch of strangers, they might have got burnt. So, it does influence you a bit, but they were kind of non-interfering in terms of technology direction and how the company went.
Yeah,
supportive, but not interfering.
For sure, yeah.
Trusted you. I suppose the other thing that struck me was the luck along the way, meeting the right people. Obviously, you were using your Irish charm and all of that, and we're very good at building relationships, but that's a very important trait to have, because it certainly helps you along the way.
Yeah, Morgan mentioned that actually before the call. Like, and we were lucky, I suppose. We had all the contacts and the friends that we had in DEC, and we in the multinational and all the the nights those Caroline would know about them, and the network was unbelievable, and all those friends, like in sport, we had a lot of contacts and friends as well, and they they were a fantastic help. And family in the States that we had, I mean, they got open some doors that they helped me reach out. But you're right. I mean, overall, my dad was a farmer. He was grown by and selling cattle, and I know the way he dealt with people, and he dealt with people very, he was very fair, and people liked him, and I love meeting people. I'm missing the States now. I never thought I'd say that. I miss the travel, and people buy stuff off people they like. Companies like the guys when they met us in Dublin and that first meeting in January, Rapid7, they liked us. Don't be an asshole. Don't be arrogant. It's a basic. It's definitely true.
Yeah, but contacts and connections are so massively important. I mean, you kind of expect it in Ireland, but even when you go to the States and you're working in a technology area, in a country and an economy as big as America, you see the same names cropping up all the time, and people move through different companies and retain connections for years. So even in a country the size of the US, personal connections are still very important there. That it's not all done formally. It's personal connections and a history of a huge bearing on what happens as well.
I'd say even more, it's probably more important because they're, you get so many calls and everything. Unless you have some connection, it's really, really hard,
Does anybody else have any questions or any comments for the guys?
Yeah, Dee, if you don't mind, I was just going to ask, guys, was acquisition always your goal, or do you think it's possible for an Irish startup to succeed, multinationally by, staying independent?
I'd take it first. I think based on being a bootstrap, and didn't have a whole pile of initial investment, and we I know what Mark would say, we probably didn't want the huge headaches around VCs and becoming a big company. to be honest. Like, and I suppose in the back of our minds, after a year or two, definitely we said, listen, we want an acquisition was definitely a target, an exit mechanism, because we thought it was the more realistic based on our background and our expertise and the people we had. And that was the most realistic way that we would exit. So, and to answer your second question, there are companies, and there's one in Galway, for example, I know of, who are doing very well and scaling massively in sales and marketing wise, and they're doing a great job. So it's definitely possible. And you get the right people and the right funding in place. It's hard work, but it's just a different route. I don't know what you think, Mark.
I think it's possible. I wouldn't say I think it's impossible. The finance and the war chest you need to scale out a sales operation to build a brand is just enormous. So, to build up the revenue, to have those reserves, I think is quite difficult from here. That's where VC and those kind of scale, and why you sell to a bigger company, is that they have the resources to do that. We built a product, and one of the reasons we wanted to sell it to a bigger company was to make sure that the product lived on and got used and got more widespread. Where we've grown the customer base as much in the last 12 months as we did in the previous 17 years. That's the scale that Rapid7 brought to us. We're just far more established and far more deployed than we were. And I'm not sure we ever would have got to that scale on our own. Other people might have better skills, but I don't think we had it. We were pure engineering. Unless you have the good sales, marketing, finance, and all the other bits and pieces that need to scale out the sales, marketing, operation, and brand building, I'd say it's quite difficult.
Okay, thanks.
No problem at all. No problem.
Okay, I have another call. I got to go.
That was an hour exactly. Hope that was okay.
That was great, guys. Great story.
No problem at all.
Write the book. I'll be waiting on it.
Don't encourage him.
I'd rather make a movie anyway.
Yeah, I could see you in that movie too.
We could see him taking notes during the conversations. Okay, book.
All right, guys.
Bye, thanks.
Okay, guys.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. That was great.
Thanks so much for joining me. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.